Indigenous Affairs Minister Nigel Scullion and Federal Tourism Minister Steve Ciobo gave a media conference on the day of the Australian Tourism Awards ceremony in Darwin. At the top of the agenda was the announcement of growth figures for tourism and the benefits for Indigenous employment.
Another fantastic day in the Northern Territory. It's a delight to be here with my colleague Steve Ciobo, Minister for Tourism and Investment. I mean, who wouldn't want to be here? Have a look around. This is just an absolutely fantastic destination. But we do need a bit of help, and I have to say to Steve, thanks so much, mate. A 13% increase in international tourism to Darwin. That's what grows our economy. For those of you who will remember, I can remember it was 4 years ago, here at the front of this hotel, when I'm saying the government actually bought this with the previous government for Indigenous employment, and I want an explanation about it. We don't have one single Indigenous person working here. It was great to sit down with a bunch of them today. 20% of this hotel now has Indigenous employment, which is exactly what this should be about. Because when tourism grows, you've got to look about what international tourists want. And they want to have an interaction with our first Australians. And what better place to ensure that we irrigate jobs, people, throughout our industry.
We know that we are having more tourists, staying longer and spending more money than we ever had before. I've been very pleased to be part of a government that's put record funding into Tourism Australia, record funding that's helping to deliver more international tourists than ever before. I note in passing that today the Shadow Tourism Minister put out a release saying that the Northern Territory had experienced a decline in international tourism numbers. As Nigel said, we've had a 13% increase in international arrivals into the Northern Territory since Labor was last in government. In the last 12 months, on the latest figures, we've actually had a 5% increase. I think, quite frankly, that because the Labor Party has never experienced such strong growth with tourism numbers as the Coalition is currently experiencing, that they obviously just can't keep up with the numbers. So I'm very pleased that the initiatives of the Federal Coalition Government to provide record funding to Tourism Australia, coupled with coordinated efforts across the country, is now reaping dividends in terms of more tourists, spending more, and ultimately the reason that's good news for Australians is because it creates more employment opportunities for Australians. And at the end of the day, one of the government's most fundamental roles is to help bring about an environment that's conducive for more Australians to be able to get jobs.
Senator Scullion also spoke about the Indigenous Procurement Policy and the successes in Indigenous economic development.
500 businesses that didn't have contracts before have them today. When Labor was in government, it was $6.2 million purchase. It's now $284 million in purchases, and that was after 12 months. Absolutely remarkable. Now, we provided information to those people for that story. For whatever reasons, this is entirely theirs, that they sought to leave them out. So the inference was, of course, well, this is only really a handful of people. Well, 500 businesses I don't consider a handful for 1,500 contracts. But the principle, my motivation for doing this was Indigenous employment. Across the board, 42% employment. 42% employment with this initiative, and they are 3% of our population. It is an outstanding success, and nobody has provided any evidence to the contrary. If you're not engaging communities in their own future and their own economic development, it won't work. We've been doing that all along. But we need to ensure with everything that we do that we are fully engaged. So that's the reason why the IAC will now be completely engaged with the Congress of First Peoples. They'll be guiding us through a whole range of national fora that deals quite specifically in portfolio areas of justice, early childhood, education, health. So their experts can feed into the IAC and we can evaluate continuously our own policy so we get the very best policy outcome and service delivery for our first Australians. So our focus remains the same. It's become a little bit more focused on some areas because the evaluation said we need to focus on that areas, and that's what we're doing.